G'day, Ben. So good to see you, mate. And you're dialing in all the way from New York. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Daniel. Yeah, great to be here.
It's wonderful, isn't it? Modern technology. We get to connect over long distances and have good conversations. But maybe just before we dive on in, Ben, be good just for you to give us a bit of who you are, what you've done, where you are now, and what do you do now?
Sure, no worries. I am the CEO of What's Next at the moment, a HR consulting firm. We've been around for about 17 years, but diving back into my past, I originally I did a degree in marine biology back in the day, and ended up running warehouses for about 20 years across a lot of logistical firms. Always managed people, and yeah, for the last 12 years, have been running What's Next in Southeast Queensland as a HR consulting firm.
Fantastic. So you really help those small businesses, medium businesses who maybe aren't or don't want to have their own HR department and take on and that, but want to have that expertise and to support their teams. What are some of the big challenges you see your types of clients have most often?
Yeah, they're usually people related, which I think if you went to a lot of small businesses and asked them what their challenges are, they're either cash flow or people related. So we end up putting our I suppose ourselves in their shoes as the business owner's shoes and try to provide a commercial approach to HR. But then we're using people and HR as our tool around consulting. But yeah, the challenges are usually around people and the differences in people and motivating people, culture, performance, those sort of things are usually the challenges we come across.
Yeah, look, I hear, I get to work with lots of different leaders across lots of industries, and like you, people problems tend to come up in small, large, all sorts of different organizations. What are some of the key topics? I mean, some of the things I'm hearing at the moment, and it'd be good to get your thoughts on these as well. Things like how do we sort of deal with this work from home, not work from home, and it almost feels like it's bleeding into a an entitlement sort of conversation. Have you sort of come across this in your travels?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, absolutely. I mean, all over the world, both in New York and both Northern Hemisphere and Southern Hemisphere, it's been a huge challenge since COVID. That there is an entitlement now being built into, I think, society that can be a choice to work from home. And I think in a small business that can be quite challenging for small businesses and for managers and new managers as to how to motivate and how to manage people when they can't see them. They've traditionally seen them in front of them in the office, but having them not there is certainly a challenge. And it really provides a challenge for managers that are experienced. I think it provides that challenge for that and how to motivate, keep in touch with them, communicate, understand what's going on in their world. So yeah, it's certainly a challenge. The working from home.
Why do you think that's the case? That it's those sort of inexperienced managers that are struggling the most with this sort of position.
I think it's highlighted some inadequacies in management, middle management, and new management. In my opinion, I think it sort of highlights that when you don't have people in front of you where you can be observing what's going on. I think there's certainly some trust issues we find with a lot of small businesses and a lot of businesses that don't necessarily set outcomes for their employees to achieve. If that's not set up, they can be wondering what people are doing, and I think it erodes trust. And I think at both ends when that's the case, and there's not, I think there can be a problem, and then yeah, it causes problems culturally.
Yeah, it becomes a bit of a sort of death by a thousand cuts, doesn't it? I don't give good instructions. I don't set up good sort of objectives and clear goals. Therefore, I don't really know what they're working on. They don't know what they're supposed
Yeah,
to be working. Like it just becomes a whole
yeah,
bunch of different things. And I guess often I'll get called in towards the end of that, the build of that pressure and tension,
yeah.
and say, well, how do we fix it all? What are some of the things that What Next and you do to, I guess, get in front of that problem and try and help people through that sort of mix?
Yeah, I mean it's not that different to what we would normally do before people were working from home, but getting some consistency, I think, is important, and building HR frameworks into businesses, and making sure everyone's treated consistently. It's very easy to have or deal with the problem child or the squeaky wheel. But sometimes when you can't see everyone and they're working from home and not having a consistent framework of communication and everyone being treated in the same way, I think that's where we see the issues, and we try to build that into sustain the culture and sustain what's happening from a people management perspective.
On that, do you think everyone should be treated the same way? This is a sort of an interesting
Yeah.
question, right, around equality and equity. And what are your thoughts
Mhm.
in space? It's a bit of an interesting area for me.
Yeah, and look, it is interesting. I think there's certainly there are some frameworks that should be consistent across a business, but yeah, you're right. It is. I don't think you can say everyone should be treated the same way because everyone responds differently. Everyone is, you need to meet people where they're at and work on them individually. I think that there is a danger is trying to be too uh, set in framework type situations and treating everyone the same way, because I think you can miss out on getting the best out of the individuals. Even with reward and recognition, people like to be rewarded differently than others. So there's certainly some individual need to work and meet people where they're at as individuals for managers with individuals. But I think across a business, there needs to be some consistency of knowing when you're having a one-on-one, when your performance reviews are happening throughout the year, allowing them to do things like anonymous surveys and provide feedback without any retribution. So I think there's things like that from a consistency perspective, but yeah, certainly as individuals, everyone's very different, and yeah, certainly needs to be treated differently.
Yeah, that's one that comes up quite a bit. I often will talk in running a masterclass on this around, how do you give good positive feedback? And, I cite a study out of Duke University, Dan Ariely's work that, a handwritten note is a really
Mm,
great driver of productivity. And of course, there'll often be
mm,
someone who says, well, I wouldn't want a note, and I don't think my people would want a note. And I think the challenge is when they don't know what to do, sometimes they do nothing. And
yeah.
as you said, it's really going, actually, this person would rather me putting them
Mm,
on my shoulders and run around the office cheering, and this person just wants me to say well done quietly,
yeah,
and both will get a good outcome, but I need to know the difference. How do you help
absolutely.
how do you help leaders understand those differences when they're really busy doing the work?
Yeah, yeah. We like to demonstrate it through, I mean, anonymous surveys are just a super powerful tool, in my opinion, if you're asking the right questions and you're benchmarking. And one of the questions specifically around this is how you like to be rewarded. We put into an anonymous survey and we give them options to rate the different ways. And I think we have things in there like, bonuses, financial. We also have private recognition, public recognition, and different ways in there. And it's always interesting for business owners to see that, because they often think people want to be rewarded the way that they like to be rewarded and the way that their experience has been in their working career. And it's often very different. We often find that things like private recognition are often quite high, above training, above bonuses sometimes. And, private recognition is easy. It's a text message on a Friday or a written note, like you said, and showing that you care and showing that you value their work in a way like that doesn't cost anything. But business owners and managers need to understand that and understand that some simple touch points like that can go a long way for certain individuals.
Yeah, I know. Google did a big study into whether they asked people what they wanted. They all said money, and they didn't believe them. So they A/B tested it and found that actually
Yeah.
people who got different, more meaningful sort of rewards were happier and
Mm.
productive, right? So it definitely happens. One thing I guess is interesting when I look at an organization like yours, which does such great work, is I still have these sort of echoes of leaders I've worked with or business owners I've worked with thinking, oh, HR is just, this fluffy thing over there
Mm.
that doesn't, unfortunately, they either think of it that way or they think of them as the people who write, policies and IR and, all this sort of very tight contractual stuff. And
Yeah.
tell me about, how do you see sort of the
Mm.
positioning, and why do these things happen? Why do we get to these sort of these stereotypes?
Yeah. I mean, it's good. Like HR's got an identity crisis, and it has since we started this business 17 years ago. And it was one of the reasons we started it, that we really don't like the way HR works in businesses. And we wanted to provide some assistance alongside a business owner, to get past that. Because HR, you're right, it can sit between employees and business owners, and can be almost like the police, and it can be perceived as very fluffy. But really, there's a strategic advantage to understand your people and get your HR right. And if you're doing that better than a similar company down the road, you're going to have a strategic advantage in getting more out of your team and more engaged, better culture, and far better outputs and commercial returns. So, we certainly take a very commercial approach, and we've created our business to do that because of the reason that internal HR can often, unfortunately, build a castle around themselves and become a little self-important and stop the return that they should be driving for the CEO or the business owner.
Yeah, I remember many years ago, I was consulting inside a big organization, and we were working with the HR team, and I won't mention the company or the person, but this HR leader said, "Listen, the business just has to do what we bloody tell them, and this is the way it's got to be, and they've got to make sure that they do all these things." And I remember sitting there with this person saying, "You know that we don't make any money here, don't you? We're a cost center. Our job is to serve the people who make the money, not to tell them what to do." And there is that. And I think that would be even more important in your sort of relationship where there's a really simple direct cost, and they're bringing you in. You've got to find those results. How do you therefore demonstrate that? Because, like you said, improved culture, engagement. There's really good research that says all this makes money, but sometimes when push comes to shove, the first things people cut are training, team development, biscuits in the tea room, those sorts of things.
Yeah.
How do you demonstrate that value?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and it's difficult, and it is a balance to do so. And it really depends on the situation. I don't like to put too many blanket answers to this, but certainly understanding what the business strategy is and how the HR department can help the business get there is the way that we like to look at that. And that can manifest in a lot of different ways, whether it's vision, mission, values getting clear, or a functional structure being clear, or bringing AI into the business and changing the roles and evolving with some of that technological change. But it's understanding the direction of where that business needs to go, and that's commercial acumen is really lacking, unfortunately, in the HR function in a lot of places. I don't want to be too blanket there, but where HR is effective is certainly when there's some commercial understanding and acumen around where the business wants to go and how you could help the leaders achieve that. I think that's the angle that needs to be taken.
And look, just from a personal perspective, how did you go from marine biologist studying stuff under the water, I guess, to caring about people? What drives you to sort of have this concern for HR and people and teams?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've always managed people, even from my very first job at Pizza Hut back in the early days. Became a manager quite early when I was in my teen years, and that went on to when I started in warehousing. I was often managing people from a very, very early age. So I've always managed big teams of people operationally and wanting to get the best out of them. That's what I bring to HR. I certainly aren't technically trained in HR. It's more from a leadership and having managed people and have to motivate people of different ages and different drives and different things they wanted to get out of their roles. So that's kind of how I've made my way through here into HR, and then really understand how you need to get a commercial return from your team. But there is you need to understand them. And I think there's three things in leadership. In my own opinion, there's three sort of equal buckets. I think there's vulnerability, so really understanding and sharing your own, not having to be the smartest person in the room. And really dropping your guard, sharing stories and being vulnerable, I think builds a lot of trust. I think empathy is really, really important, is really getting to meet someone where they are at and not have a blanket approach to individuals. And then I think commercial acumen is the other one, which we've talked about a little bit already. But I think those three buckets are really, really important for leaders to know. And that's the way that the lens I look through at getting the most out of people.
Yeah, look, I think I'd agree that the driver of having that trusted relationship with your people is so important, and particularly in sometimes in those small teams where you've got so much to do, it is this sort of luxury that can sometimes happen in people's minds that, oh, leaders have got all this time, they can sit around on a Chase lounge and read some reports or something, right? But particularly in small medium, that doesn't exist. So, are there any sort of ways in which you sort of help them to unlock that vulnerability? Because that can be a bit scary sometimes for a business leader.
Mm,
They want to have confidence. They want to just fire off results. They've got to get stuff done, right? And then you're asking them to be interested in people and be vulnerable and share, which both
mm.
take time and are scary. How does that sort of, how do you have that conversation with leaders around taking that step?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's again not a simple answer. It's quite difficult depending on the situation. But I mean, we use things to open the conversation. We use things like disc profiling, behavior profiling, and things like that, where leaders can reflect a little on themselves and what's natural to their own profile, and then do that with their team as well, and understand where to meet the team there, understanding what drives them, and understanding where what their behavior profile is. So we use tools like that sometimes to demonstrate how to do that. But yeah, there's a lot of middle management training we end up doing where technically strong supervisors or managers have been promoted along the line, but they certainly didn't sign up to be people managers, and they often come to us sort of help us out with this, and
Hmm.
we do a lot of training in that perspective around their people management, and having these type of discussions with them.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the key things the most common things I run across working with that middle management leader is someone who is, they're a good engineer or they're, good at doing their job, and suddenly someone says, "I want to pay you more, so I'm going to promote you." So they pay them more and they promote them, and this person then has no idea how to do this new job because it's not what they were doing. It's
Oh,
managing people, right? Uh,
yeah, yeah.
and again, there's so many skills that go into that.
Mm.
Unfortunately, I see too often that we promote them, they fail, and then we turf them and hope to get someone new in. Or worse, we just hold on to them because we really like them and
Mm.
blame the people below. Are there
Yep.
any sort of things or places you think books that a new leader, a leader who's taken that leap and is feeling like they're
Mm.
in that space? What are some of the things you'd recommend they do
Mm.
straight away? Obviously, we should call What's Next or my company, Mapping Consulting, and get some support. But before they do that, or as they're doing that, what else could
Yeah.
they do?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's lots of books and there's lots of different approaches. Um, there's a great book that we actually use as consultants in our team. We give to people when they start, and it's called what is it called? I'm going to have to remember now. Getting Naked. It doesn't. It's not about getting naked, but it's about naked consulting, and uses vulnerability as one of the powerful tools, and empathy, and some of the things I've talked about here. It's a great fable, really easy read. Patrick Lencioni is the author, and he's a very, very clever man. He's written some fantastic books along the way, and it's one that's my favorite because I think it applies not only to consultants, it applies to managers. You don't have to be the hero. You can share, and you can uh, empathize with people along the way, and you can make other people the hero. And it takes a lot of some great ways of explaining that in a non-confrontal way in this fable. So yeah, that's certainly a book that I recommend to everyone. I think it's a fantastic one. Um,
Yeah,
but yeah, it's the other thing too. I don't think you have to promote people to be people managers all the time. And I think if you look at a functional structure, you should look at technical experts within that as being not as hierarchical structure as sometimes we traditionally look at. So I think you can be the best engineer, or you could be the best salesman, and you can still remain there and be an expert in that space and still progress through a business. And I think all too many businesses don't look at it that way, and they only show one pathway.
yeah.
And I think it's a shame because it sets people up to fail, and they often lose some really good people in that way. So, yeah, setting its structure up functionally and really understanding what you need, and then where people are best placed to fit back into that is an important part of setting a business up.
Yeah, I think that's a really good call. That you're right. We sort of promote people because we want to pay them more, and it almost comes back to this equality problem, right? That, oh
Mm,
well, I can't pay this person more and this person less for doing the same job, but actually you're not paying for the job, you're paying for the expertise, you're paying for the
Yeah.
outcomes. And
Mm.
yeah, I think again, being able to have that trusted relationship, good conversation and communication with your team is a really good call out there. Um, Ben, I'd just love to ask you some of my empathy card questions before we wrap
Sure.
up. Always good to understand a bit more about, the person behind all of the wisdom. So the first one I've got is, what's a challenge you faced that made you stronger, and how did you overcome it?
Ooh, it's a good question. Uh, if I dive back into my early years of managing, when I was managed when I was quite young, so I would have been 19, 20 years old. Uh, One of the biggest challenges that I had was managing people that were far more experienced in the role than I were, and a lot older than I was as well at the time, and having to build rapport with those individuals as well as new people coming in, and sort of having to have them having to build trust in that situation. I think was a big challenge I had early on, and has probably held me in good stead over my career. Is working out how to do that and meeting people where they're at and getting to know them and what drives them and all those sort of things. But building that rapport early on, I had to put a lot of effort into that to be taken seriously in the early days, and then work with a lot of managers over the last couple of decades in that same sort of situation. And there's a lot of ego, unfortunately, in leadership and management. Um, it's a shame because it blocks people from learning, and it really stops people from developing. So I had to learn in the early days that it wasn't the title you had to actually get results, and you had to build rapport with different individuals along the way to do so.
Yeah, I remember early in my career, a wonderful gentleman named Gary Galvin once said to me, because I was going for a job, and there was someone who was far more experienced than me. He had 18 years of experience, and I only had one or two. And I said, like, I don't want to go for this job because this other guy's going for it. And he said, there's two ways to have 18 years of experience. You can spend 18 years learning and growing and developing and really building your knowledge, or you can have the same year 18 times in a row. And he said, don't let the number of years fool you in that. So
Yeah,
yeah, I think I've
yeah,
felt that as well, right? And it
yeah.
comes back to that vulnerability, doesn't it? It comes back
It
to
does.
being humble
Yeah,
about your understanding. Awesome.
yeah, yeah.
What this one might be interesting because I know you're traveling a bit at the moment. How do you recharge after a challenging day or week?
How do I recharge? I've had to work that out over the years of what I need to do, but I need to get out and do some exercise, and that's a big thing for me. When I'm in New York, I spend a lot of time in Central Park during the day because I'm doing Australian hours at night. So I do a fair bit of time in Central Park. I live on the Gold Coast. I spend a lot of time on the beach, but I got to be active is the way that I recharge. So I spend a lot of my weekends, getting out there into the elements and either running or walking or spending some time in the ocean and things like that. That's how I recharge personally.
Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah.
Don't jump in the Hudson for a quick swim. Or...
No, 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 no swimming in New York. No, it's actually quite warm over here at the moment, but yeah, certainly not jumping in the Hudson. But Central Park is an incredible place to explore and see. It's in a very, very incredible part of the city. So yeah, you can get right in the middle of Central Park and you can't see any buildings, you can't hear any sirens, and you could be anywhere in the world. So it's quite a unique city, New York.
Yeah, it is. It is wonderful. Last one, as we wrap up. This was often a hard one for people to think through. What's a song that really defines your childhood?
Oh, wow. Um, a song that defines my childhood. Oh, it'd be something pretty upbeat. I had a pretty blessed childhood, actually. I had some brothers and a family. I grew up in Adelaide. I was certainly brought up in a fantastic, loving family. Um, I can't think of a name of a song that would do it, but it would certainly be an upbeat, happy song. I was
Yeah.
very blessed, blessed to have a lot of people around me that loved me and supported me, and also sort of encouraged me to reach for what I wanted to do in life as well. So yeah, it would be something sort of upbeat and inspirational and happy. I'd imagine, but I can't think of a song that kind of that depicts all of that. But yeah, that would be the type of song anyway.
Yeah, ripper. Look, and I'm sure there's lots of people out there screaming at the podcast, going, "Oh, I know this song. What about this song?
Yeah,
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 this
yeah.
one's for
I'll
you."
share
I'll
it.
ask them to send it through as a message on LinkedIn. You'll get hopefully some
I'd love to.
things
I'd love to.
coming through. Awesome,
Well,
Ben.
I
Look,
love
it's been
music, so I certainly will.
yeah, wonderful. It's been a real pleasure chatting to you, mate. Have a great time in New York, and I know it's late over there now, so you're probably ready for a cup of tea and bedtime. But thanks so much for having a chat, and really good to have you on the podcast.